Hello, everybody. I'm Stan Goldstein with Kates-Boylston Publications. Today, we're joined by Kevin McKay, the manager of the Cremation Division of Cremation Recycling in Des Plaines, Illinois. Kevin will be doing a webinar with us here on Kates-Boylston on Tuesday, October 4th, titled How to Have a Better Understanding of Post-Cremation Metal Recycling. Kevin, glad to talk to you again.
Dan, always good to see you. Thanks for having us. We really appreciate this opportunity.
Okay. Cremation recycling refers to transparency often. How does that best relate to your company?
Well, the reason why we talk about it so much, and it's literally in our name, which is see the process, trust the difference, is because we feel as if people really need to see things in any walk of life to have the best understanding possible. And as it relates to crematories and recycling, we noticed from the very beginning, for the most part, crematory owners were totally in the dark on how this worked, meaning from the time it leaves their hands until the time it comes to us, and then we actually talked to them about what the value was. For years, none of those steps were involved. They were just sort of blindly sending this off and had no idea what was involved or what was even in there. So we, from the very beginning, took the approach of having an open door policy, which we love for all of our clients across all the different sectors we're involved in. But certainly in crematory, a lot of crematory owners took us up on that because they wanted to see how a plant worked, what's going on right behind me. As you can see, we're actually sorting through a drum of metal right now and going into the different types of metals that they fall into. This would be the non-precious heavy implant materials that we'll talk a little bit more about in the webinar, but certainly recovering all the high value smaller metals that's done and melted over here in our facility and then assayed, and that's really where the bulk of the value is. So having the access to actually see every bit of the process for us has always been very important, because we know that our clients feel very confident in our capabilities because they've been able to see how the process actually works.
Good. And you answered my question. I was going to ask what the gentleman in back of you was doing, so thank you for saying that. Yes. All right. Why is it important to work directly with an EPA-permitted recycler instead of a middleman?
Well, kind of along the same lines or in tandem with, having that transparency is, there was a saying I heard years ago, so I can't take credit for it, but click and order replaced brick and mortar. And, with the advent of the internet, anyone out there could have just started a company, so to speak, but in reality, they could be using a PO box to get all of their mail, or even a UPS store to have things shipped to them. These are metals that a funeral home / crematory are actually mandated to properly handle. So why put it in the hands first of somebody who is then just coming to somebody like us, where you could deal direct with the actual recycler, somebody who goes through the steps of being OSHA certified and EPA permitted to actually be handling this material. Along the lines of what you're saying, what you asked as far as being EPA permitted is, we've never quite understood the need to deal with a middleman or a broker in this space, when you can obviously deal direct with the recycler and have all the access to their facility.
And how can a crematory best compare cremation recycling to their current recycler if they don't use you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What we often say to a prospective crematory client is to actually take whatever their normal load is. So obviously based on volume, one crematory is going to send in more or less often than another one. So what we will say, whether that's a month's worth or 6 months or a year's worth, whatever your normal load would be, is make no changes and send that load in to us, for instance. And what I always absolutely recommend a crematory to do when they're doing this, whether it's with us or another recycling company, is to make sure not to divulge any of the numbers that they're currently getting. You don't want to effectively show your poker hand. You want to just get the absolute best sort of real results that you can get from this new recycler that you're trying. So it's very important to send the exact amount or time frame as you can, because that way you'll be able to go back and compare to any sort of results that you've gotten from the other recycling company to get the best idea of what one is stacked next to the other one.
And what kind of financial impact have you seen crematories make with the money generated from recycling revenue?
Well, it's to say pretty significant is a big understatement. So, I mean, we have, generally speaking, what we say is we use about $50 per cremation as a baseline. So not even necessarily as an average, but as what is certainly attainable, whether you're in California or New York or Minnesota or Texas. There are some geographic differences, but what we generally see are a lot of crematories coming in at about that baseline. Some are significantly higher, some are lower. But the overall point here is we're not talking about a few $100s. I mean, even on a sort of lower volume crematory that has a lower income demographic that they service, you're still talking, anywhere from several thousand to even 10, 15,000. And we have some, higher volume locations that can easily get into six figures and even 150, 200,000. So this is significant money that needs to be accounted for properly. And more to the question that you asked is whether they're applying some of this to help keep their costs down. So maintenance or, upgrading their equipment or anything around the facility, or they're taking some of it or all of it and giving it to charity. In that case, we've heard a lot of crematories, talk about, how great it is that, they're writing checks to the local hospice or food bank or churches, you name it. They're spreading that wealth back into, or I guess redistributing it back into their communities, which in my opinion is a great way to sort of look at it as like an extension of their marketing budget, because you're going to these people that are in your community that could actually impact your business, and you're taking this money that most crematory and funeral homeowners don't necessarily always feel comfortable with spending on whatever they want to. So this is a great way for them to give back in a way they likely wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So, so I hope that answered your question. We've heard it, everything from maintenance to new equipment to spreading the wealth via charity. This has had a really huge impact on their business.
Yeah, I remember the charity element of it. Last time you did a webinar with us, you spoke about that. So that was great to see how money could get donated to the different charities. Talk about cremation recycling. How long have you been in business? Your background with it? How long you've been there? I know you're not far from O'Hare Airport, right? You're right out there in Chicago, the Chicago area.
Yeah, so O'Hare is, like most big cities, not actually in Chicago. It's in Rosemont, which is the next town over. We're, depending on the time of day, anywhere from 10 to 15-minute drive, which is great because we have a number of owners that have flown in literally just to see the process, and you can get in and out pretty easily. But so we're conveniently located near there. Des Plaines is recently famous for selling the winning $billion-something lottery ticket. None of us were fortunate enough to the recipient of that, but good for them, whoever they were. But
I was going to ask you that. I see the winner still hasn't come forward. So,
it wasn't me.
Not you.
But, so we have been around since 1982. So we're actually in our 40th anniversary year. Cremation is one of the divisions that we operate, but jewelry and pawn and a lot of industrial, a lot of middlemen and brokers who are in some of those other sectors need somebody like us who is effectively the end of the line before this metal really gets on and repurposed into something else. So we've been functioning for 40 years here. Cremation recycling was something that came to be about just over 6 years ago. That's where the cremation recycling division came from, was really seeing the need for some clarity and some transparency in this space because frankly speaking, it just wasn't there. And I was actually a client of Mid-States. I was just a dental buyer for years, and I saw a natural sort of a path to working with the ownership of Mid-States Recycling and starting this, and I encouraged him to let me take this project on, and we've done very well so far. But so I've been in the business for 21 years now, but I would say the last 6 has been exclusively focused on cremation, which has been fantastic.
And I don't know if the last time we talked was pre-pandemic or not. So let's talk a little bit about the pandemic, what effect that had on the business.
Sure. So naturally, from a strictly business point of view, every crematory owner out there can relate to the increase in business. I mean, it was, just look at the statistics of how many people died in the United States, and there were that many more that were cremation. So we basically never missed a beat. Unfortunately, on our end, right as it happened, we actually had a woman who worked here for over 15 years who was unfortunately immunocompromised, and she passed away right at the beginning. And we were closed for about 10 days, and ever since then we've been open and haven't missed a beat. But yeah, all the crematory owners out there that were just absolutely slammed with work during those days, we were seeing that as well, naturally. So.
All right, just give us a little preview of your webinar. Again, it's going to be on October 4th, how to have a better understanding of post-cremation recycling. You hit on some of it already, but just tell us a little, give us a quick preview of that.
Sure. So a lot of that is really focused on giving the basics of, why are we talking about dental, for instance, and what are the different types of metals? Why, really was recycling almost not even something a crematory owner thought about, let alone talked about 10 years ago. And now it's completely mainstream, and it's something that's a lot more relevant. It certainly was back then, except nobody was really marketing to them. So we talk a little bit about the different metals that are there, why we're recycling, and then talk a little bit about the actual process that's involved, which basically means how we sort the metals, how we then melt them, how we analyze them, and then of course the differences and some of the keys, and I guess I should say red flags that maybe we can point out when you're talking to a prospective recycler, and some of the things you should definitely be asking and looking for when you're working with a recycler.
All right, and I've always told you this. You wrote one of my favorite columns, a cremation column for American Cemetery and Cremation magazine. You mentioned steaks. You talked about a steak is a steak, but Denny's has a steak, Outback has a steak. Gibson's in Chicago, one of the best steak places in the world, has a great steak. So let's talk about, I don't know, what are you enjoying now in the Chicago area? Pizza or something? I know the Chicago pizza is great too.
Well, of course, staples in the city that, sometimes get compared, to other parts of the world, particularly New York, would be pizza and hot dogs. I'm a native Chicagoan. And I'm right. It's not even close. Chicago is infinitely better at both. But Italian beef, that if anybody is watching the show, The Bear, I will tell you, I have a pretty thick Chicago accent. And so I'm very attuned when I hear somebody trying to fake a Chicago accent, and they don't sound anything like us. But the Italian beef is finally being put on the map, and I've never understood why somebody in New York or Boston or Philly has no concept of what an Italian beef sandwich is with giardiniera hot peppers. So to me, it's kind of cool, whether the show is good or not, to see that this is getting some publicity. So get out there and try an Italian beef if you can.
All right. And one final question, Cubs or White Sox then?
Cubs for sure, but it doesn't mean I don't really pay attention to the White Sox. But when they were in the World Series 15 or so years ago, I was rooting for them. But if they stopped playing tomorrow, I probably wouldn't care.
All right, Kevin, it's always fun to talk to you. Thank you. And again, a reminder, your webinar will be on with us on Tuesday, October 4th. You can go to AmericanFuneralDirector.com, hit on the webinars tab, and sign up for the webinar. I promise you it will be interesting. I did one before with Kevin, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. All right,
Appreciate it.
Kevin, thank you. And we'll talk to you on October 4th. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Stan. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.